Have you heard about the Philadelphia experiment? Well, if you haven't, then prepare for your mind to be blown, because this alleged tale of invisibility, teleportation, time travel, and death might just be the craziest conspiracy theory in existence. It's me. Welcome to my channel, and today we're answering the extraordinary question, how can science explain the Philly experiment? The year is 1943, World War II is raging, and American innovation has produced a new technological wonder, radar. Now utilized by both sides of the Atlantic, radar allows ships and aircraft to detect each other even when hidden from view. It's a game changer, but how could it be beaten? That's where Project Rainbow comes in, a top-secret initiative focused on developing countermeasures against enemy radar. But unlike the more successful initiatives that painted ships in disruptive colors or hung special metallic strips overboard, Project Rainbow was not messing around. Its aim was to develop ways to bend light around ships, making them completely invisible to detection. At the forefront of the project was an eccentric scientist named Franklin Schaffner, who had recently patented a device called an electromagneto-optic modulator, or EMOM. It's a complicated bit of tech. Essentially, it consists of a series of rotating disks and mirrors that scatter light beams at different angles and frequencies, effectively creating an invisibility bubble. Now, while such technology sounds like pure science fiction, it's worth remembering that the first laser was invented just 2 years earlier. So, scientists were understandably excited about what could be done. With a large budget and surprisingly little red tape, Schaefer set up shop at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard and got to work. His team consisted of civilian engineers and Navy personnel, including the Director of Naval Research, Rear Admiral Charles Esso. In May 1943, they began their first experiment, testing a smaller version of the EMOM device aboard the USS Eldridge, a small naval vessel that had recently been decommissioned. What happened next is heavily disputed. According to official accounts, the Eldridge never left port and no experiments were conducted. However, the story goes that the admiral gave the order to test the prototype EMOM device anyway. Moments later, the ship was enveloped in a brilliant flash of white light. Then it was gone. In its place was a thick cloud of fog that quickly dispersed. As onlookers watched in stunned silence, the dense fog which had been shrouding the ship suddenly lifted, revealing the vessel in all its glory. And yes, the USS Eldridge was nowhere to be seen. While nobody knows what happened next, there are many theories. Some say the ship had vanished, disappearing entirely from the face of the earth. Others claim it had been transported to Norfolk, Virginia, hundreds of miles away. And if that wasn't weird enough, things were about to get a lot stranger because according to one very controversial account, the ship reappeared, but with some crew members literally fused into its hull. After a few hours, the USS Eldridge was spotted docked in Norfolk. Sailors on board reported seeing the bodies of crew members embedded in the metal plates of the ship like they'd been burned onto the deck with molten metal. As the ship was towed back to Philadelphia, the bodies were seen oozing blood and pus, eventually dissolving into the water. News of the alleged incident spread through the city like wildfire. Soon everyone was talking about the ghost crew of the USS Eldridge. But the truth is, no one knows exactly what happened to the USS Eldridge, what it was doing at sea, whether it was conducting classified experiments or simply sailing between ports. And there is no record of any unusual incidents involving the ship. However, rumors persisted, and in 1955, a man named Carlos Allende wrote a story about the alleged incident for a Philadelphia magazine. He claimed that he de-interviewed some of the surviving crew members and had examined photographs of the ghost crew, although these images have never been verified. Alain's article caused a sensation. Suddenly, everyone was talking about the Philly experiment again. A decade later, a local TV station aired a documentary about the event, which only fueled further speculation. But where did the story come from? Why do so many people believe it? Well, there are two possible explanations. The first is that it actually happened, but details were covered up by the government. There's certainly evidence to support this. For example, the EMOM device was real and several patents were filed for similar devices during the war. Plus, the U.S. Navy has a long history of covering up embarrassing incidents. Just ask the crew of the USS Thresher, whose nuclear submarine sank in 1963, killing all 129 crew members. For decades, the Navy refused to acknowledge the disaster, claiming only that the sub had been lost at sea. However, there's another explanation for the Philadelphia experiment. Perhaps it was an elaborate hoax concocted by journalists, scientists, and members of the public looking to capitalize on America's fascination with UFOs and conspiracy theories. This is supported by the fact that many key pieces of evidence are missing. For example, no photos of the ghost crew exist. Additionally, the incident was never mentioned in any official records until nearly 10 years after it supposedly occurred. So what do we really know? Well, thanks to declassified documents, we know that the U.S. Navy did conduct experiments with radar invisibility. We also know that a scientist by the name of Franklin Schaeffer worked on these experiments and that he filed a patent for a type of device that could bend light waves. But that's about it. Everything else is speculation. So why won't the U.S. Navy talk about it? Well, they've officially denied that the Philadelphia experiment ever took place, claiming it's a hoax. However, there are rumors that the original documents detailing the experiments were destroyed in a fire at the Washington Navy Yard in 1973. If true, this would certainly explain why there's so little evidence to go around. But some people remain convinced that the Philadelphia experiment is real, citing the lack of evidence as proof of a cover-up. Physicists who have studied the alleged details of the Philly experiment have said that it is impossible for a ship to disappear using current technology. However, they also admit that invisibility is a tricky area of physics. As we all know, light travels in waves. When these waves hit an object, they bounce off it in all directions. This is why we can see objects. Their light waves are being bounced back into our eyes. But if we could manipulate these light waves by bending them around an object, then that object would become invisible to anyone nearby. So far, scientists have only managed to make tiny particles invisible by cooling them down to near absolute zero. But one day invisibility cloaks may become a reality. Even if they do, though, that doesn't necessarily mean the Philadelphia experiment was real. According to physicists, the EMOM device, which supposedly created an invisibility bubble around the Eldridge, would have required an absurd amount of energy to operate. Plus, even if it did work, it wouldn't have made the ship invisible. It would have made it appear as a bright white blob, like a miniature sun. And if that wasn't enough, other scientists have pointed out that the alleged incident violates Einstein's theory of special relativity. According to this theory, an object cannot move faster than the speed of light. However, the story goes that the EMOM device not only made the USS Eldridge invisible, but it also transported the ship hundreds of miles in just a few hours. If that's true, then Einstein was wrong, or perhaps the Philadelphia experiment wasn't about invisibility at all, but time travel. Some believe the ship didn't go anywhere. It just vanished from our timeline, becoming unstuck in a time vortex before reappearing in the past. However, while the science behind time travel is still highly debated, most experts agree it is impossible to send an object or person backwards in time without collapsing the entire universe. So there you have it. According to scientists, the Philadelphia experiment was either a massive cover-up or a complete hoax. But one thing's for sure, the mystery surrounding the USS Eldridge continues to fascinate people around the world. What do you think? Do you think the military really could have bent time and space over 80 years ago? Or is the whole thing just a fantasy? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out one of my others popping up on your screen now. And don't forget to subscribe for updates. See you next time.